Basically, our unit had the first fire support, fully operational first fire support unit in the Army. And I know I was the grader for the first fire support Army training test there was, and I did that at Oberglass, Germany, and flunked every one of them. I had one lieutenant, he wanted to argue with the chief grader, and I called the chief grader came over to me. He said, "Why did you flunk that lieutenant?" I said, "Sir, very simple. He couldn't hit the target." And he looked at me and said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Sitting in an M60 tank, bulldozer blade on the front, which is what we had for a vehicle at the time. We had to borrow the vehicles from the maneuver units for the people to support them. And I told him what the target was. Pointed it out to him. He said he saw it. And I said, that's all we were supposed to do. I said, fire on the target." He looked at me and said, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Very simple." He took off his helmet, got out his compass, set it on the tank, turned it toward the target, looked at his map, sent the grid in, sent the direction in, and he looked at me and said, "Stop right there, I know what you're saying now. You're right, you should have failed him." I said, "Did you tell him what he was," or he asked me, "Did you tell him what he was supposed to do after it was over?" I said, "Of course." Because I asked him after it was over, I said, "Do you know why you failed?" And he told me no. I said, "Okay, let's go through it step by step, like we're doing it again." And he set the compass down. I said, "What did you just do?" And he looked down and he said, "Oh, you don't set a compass on a big, huge chunk of steel because the arrow's going to line up with that." I said, "Well, what could you have done?" He said, "Not sure I know." And I hollered down inside the tank and I said, "Hey guys, turn that turret to where you're pointing at that target." So they turned the turret and I said, "Now tell me the direction to the target." And they did. And he said, "That's all I had to do." I said, "Sure, use everything you can." I said, "This tank is a tool too." He said, "I didn't know that." I said, "Now you do." I said, "Talk to these guys in the tank."